Soya and Sensei combined together to have an insanely epic battle with Shiraishi and Generalissimo, which has a surprise ending setting up the finale of this gnarly anime series. The ending of this episode of Planet With had me giddy like a friggin' schoolboy. I absolutely loved this episode. It's kind of hard not to like this episode, as it's essentially a giant 19-minute action scene of watching two robots constantly collide with one another and use ridiculous otherworldly abilities. I cannot speak the praises of this episode enough. It was thrilling from beginning to end. What I especially loved about it is that in the previous episode, we finally got to see what would happen when Soya and Sensei actually combined with that giant Sensei spaceship, and it transformed him into a giant robot. The minute that I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to get another battle with that, and it's going to be a giant robot against a giant robot, and guess what? We got it in this episode. It lived up to the hype in every way possible. And it also had an amazing ending, an ending that I honestly did not see coming, so I'm going to go ahead and put up the spoiler warning right here. If you have not watched this episode, go watch it and then come back to this review. So, like I said, this entire episode right here was basically Soya and Sensei battling against Shiraishi and Generalissimo. And the first half of the episode was them in just their initial forms, the smaller versions, where Generalissimo would swallow Shiraishi and Sensei would swallow Soya. This battle right here was basically even throughout the entire time, whether it be the actual fighting choreography itself or just the abilities that they actually use. Both characters kind of have mirrored abilities, where when Soya uses the cat hammer ability, you have Generalissimo who's using the giant wolf's head. Or when Soya decides to fly around with his flaming blue wings, Generalissimo actually summons a superhero cape. They match each other in almost every single way, and they just absolutely wreck and destroy each other, and even end up flying into space. It gets that ridiculous. The use of weapons and fighting choreography and just the way that these things move and look honestly make this one of the most unique anime battles that I've ever seen. But again, I think the best thing about it, and this is going to seem very strange, has got to be the sound design. I don't know what it is about this show, but they use a lot of really unique sound effects, and just the noises that the mechs make when they're skidding across the earth, flying through the sky, every single time that they collide with one another, it just feels so freaking impactful and awesome. When they're in space and attacking each other, this giant beam attack that Generalissimo does makes this sound that I've never heard in another anime series, and they could have easily used a stock sound effect, but it looks like they really went out of their way to give this series a unique feel in the way that it looks and in the way that it sounds, and I really think that that amplifies every single action scene between these characters. But eventually it does get to the moment where they beat each other up so much in space that they end up falling back to the Earth. Their giant spaceships respectively capture them, they swallow them, and they transform, and a giant Godzilla battle ensues. Now, we've already seen Soya's form, but we've never actually seen Shiraishi and Generalissimo's, and basically, it kind of reminds me of the Big O robot, if any of you guys have ever seen that anime series. The way that its arms actually work are kind of like these giant pistons with these like huge drills at the end of them, which it actually uses to even break through the Terra Cat hammer. Basically, Generalissimo here is really powerful and almost seems like he does have the edge in battle, but watching these two both just collide with one another and utilize their individual abilities is just, oh, it's so explosively awesome. But the way that the actual battle ends might be the most surprising thing, because it almost looks like Soya is about to be defeated when out of nowhere, flying across the ocean, we get to see the return of Takezo, who looks like he's finally going to utilize his secret technique that we never had an opportunity to see, where he takes the entire power of his mech and transforms it into a giant psychic sword, which he uses to cut directly through Generalissimo's attack, allowing Soya to get one big hit on him. What I love about this moment is we get to see that Takezo actually has no problem with the fact that Soya actually ended up killing his son. If anything, it ultimately saved him at the end of the day. They almost make it seem like Takezo is actually going to die as well, but he's actually okay by the end of the episode. Before I move on to the actual finale, I want to mention that we do get to see the return of all of the members of Grand Paladin in this episode, especially Nezia, whose return in this episode was hilarious, by the way. It's a shame we didn't really get to see more of him in the series, as he, I think, is probably probably one of my favorite members of Grand Paladin, if only for how incredibly funny that he is. But getting back to the finale of this fight, what I love about how it's instigated is when Soya and Sensei utilize the giant Terra Cat Hammer to punch Generalissimo's giant mech directly in the chest, which opens up a hole. They then fly out in their regular first form, flying into the body of his giant robot, and they end up having a battle inside of there, which ends with maybe the most unexpected end to this giant mech fight that I could have possibly expected. It was also a really nice mirror to Soya's battle with Takashi, because it kind of ends the same way, with Soya actually stopping Shiraishi, and then Sensei and Generalissimo finally having at it, and Sensei actually uses the giant iron clogs that Soya is wearing to actually take him out, and he actually manages to destroy this thing on his chest, which is the sealing device. That was kind of the stipulation of the entire battle, is not just them actually fighting, but as long as Sensei could destroy this, that would be the end of the actual battle. And of course, Sensei is completely victorious in this moment, but Generalissimo is not actually a bad guy. Definitely more of an intense rival for Sensei, and it leads to one of the more powerful scenes of the entire episode, where Soya actually manages to bring everyone together. Grand Paladin, the Sealing faction, the Pacifist faction. It's going really great with the themes of the entire series, which I really think elevates it quite a bit. It's really great to see all of these characters cooperating and getting ready to prepare against the battle against the giant dragon, which according to the people of Paradise is about 4 to 5 years away from happening. Now when I heard that, I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if they're actually going to do a time skip. And yes, they actually do. The last couple minutes of this episode, we get to see that it's about 4, maybe 5 years later, and Soya actually returns to his hometown where Nozomi is, who is also a little bit older, as is he. He's a little taller, resembling his brother a little bit more, and yeah, did anyone else expect a time skip in this series? I did not at all, but I just cannot wait to see how it's all going to play out. Guys, this was an amazing episode. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Planet With? My God, what an entertaining episode this was. If it wasn't the action scenes, it had to be the return of Nezia and his ridiculous twirling. One aspect of this episode that I thought was pretty interesting is that we actually learned the real names of both Sensei and Generalissimo. Sensei's real name is Rasha Varric, and Generalissimo goes by the name of Karelin. I'm not sure if there's any significance behind these names at all. I might need to do some research on that. But it at least makes the battle feel a little more personal for these two characters, especially at the end when they're yelling out each other's name as they're attacking. But you also have to realize that you're basically looking at two furry dudes fighting, which is just in itself funny, and the fact that you can get absorbed into something like that, I really think speaks volumes for the actual, like, power of this anime series. I really think it's one of the best shows of 2018, and I really wish more people were watching it, because I'm getting so much enjoyment out of this one. I really think it's going to be a cult classic at some point. I didn't expect the time skip, however. That alone is immediately interesting and changes the way that I'm going to view the rest of the series. I don't know if there's going to be a definitive ending to this show, if it's all just building up to the battle with this dragon. If it ends there, I think I'll still be pretty satisfied with the show with what it could do, but I'd still love to see the potential of where Planet With could go into the future and how far it could go out, maybe going to other planets and seeing all types of crazy things. Really, it feels like we're still just sort of like in the inception of Planet With, if you will. But yeah, I think this episode speaks volumes about like some of the best parts about the show, the action, the sound design, the actual characters themselves, just the small moments, like one between Benica and Yosuke, which I thought was also a really great moment, where you can definitely see that their relationship is finally starting to get patched up, with Yosuke being a lot more supportive, and Yosuke even suggests that they actually go see her old sensei, who, you know, of course is probably meaning go to his grave or something. And at first she's a little apprehensive about it, but when she sees Takezo at the very end of the episode just barely surviving, she realizes this is kind of a good opportunity to make up for the demons in her life, to see her parents, to acknowledge what happened to her superior, and to maybe even start a relationship with Yosuke, someone who generally seems to care about her. It's little moments like that that really make this episode great. That and the way that they handled it with so much realism. Benica doesn't necessarily want to be a part of any side. She doesn't really know where where she belongs. If this were any other series, she'd immediately go to Soya's side, but here she's someone who has individual thoughts and actually handles it with realism. And for a show that features giant cats and dogs fighting each other, that's a weird thing to actually make work. Really, guys, this episode was fan-freaking-tastic. I loved it, the animation, the action, the character moments, and that amazing ending with the time skip. I'm just excited for the future. I'm giving this episode a 5 out of 5. I would love to get all of your thoughts about this episode in the comments section below. What you thought of the battle. Tell me about your favorite moments. What did you think about that time skip ending? And what do you hope to see from the rest of Planet With? Thank you guys for watching this review. I'll see you guys all next time. And as always, stay down there, baby.